The lecture hall of the Galactic Consortium Academy fell silent as Professor Velkthor raised one of his 4 crystalline appendages. His species, the Veltharian Collective, had authored the Treaty of Educational Segregation 3 cycles ago, a document that subtly encouraged the voluntary withdrawal of humans from advanced theoretical physics courses. Miss Arya, his voice resonated through the chamber with the cold precision of a calculated insult. Perhaps the complexity of quantum temporal mechanics is beyond your species' neurological capacity. The front row is reserved for species with proven cognitive superiority. Arya's knuckles whitened around her datapad. She sat in the coveted front seat, the one she'd earned through perfect examination scores, through nights spent unraveling equations that made her professors uncomfortable with their elegant simplicity. Around her, the lecture hall held its collective breath. 200 students from 47 species watched the human who had outscored them all. "My test results speak for themselves, Professor," Arya said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Velkthor's bioluminescent patterns flickered with what his species considered amusement. "Anomalous data points. Surely you understand that a species barely capable of interstellar travel cannot grasp concepts that took the collective millennia to comprehend." It was then that Tar moved. The young Kravik stood barely 4 feet tall, covered in rust-colored fur that identified him as a juvenile, what humans had affectionately termed cubs. His species had evolved from pack hunters on a high-gravity world, and their young retained an instinctive loyalty to those they deemed worthy. His 3-fingered hand reached across the aisle and grasped Arya's primary textbook, a massive tome on multidimensional field theory. "Tar, what are you—" Arya began. But Tar was already moving toward the back of the lecture hall, carrying her book with a determination that made his small frame seem suddenly larger. His movements triggered something primal in the 12 other Kravik cubs scattered throughout the classroom. One by one they rose from their seats. Professor Velkthor's patterns shifted to confusion, then alarm. "Students, return to your—" "We move with pack friend," Tar said simply, his translator rendering his growled words into standard galactic. He placed Arya's book on a desk in the last row. "If human goes back, cubs go back." Another cub, Mira, gathered Arya's notebooks. Human helped Mira understand gravitational lensing when others laughed. Human showed patience. Her ears flattened against her skull, a Kravik gesture of absolute resolve. The wave began slowly, then built into something unstoppable. A Kravik named Shen collected her styluses. Young Kor grabbed her backup datapad. They formed a line, a procession, carrying every item from Arya's workspace to the back row with ceremonial gravity. "This is highly irregular," Velkthor started, but his words dissolved into the growing murmur of the classroom. Because it wasn't just the Kravik cubs anymore. Thessian student, a species known for their rigid adherence to hierarchy, stood and moved her belongings to the back row. "Arya tutored me for 3 weeks before the midterm. Without payment, without expectation." Her silvery skin rippled with emotion. "I will not abandon such honor." A silicon-based Quarian, whose species had historically viewed humans as primitive carbon forms, began dismantling his entire workstation. The human solved the Quarian paradox in my thermodynamics assignment, a problem my own professors could not crack. His crystalline voice carried across the hall. "Cognitive inferiority? I think not, Professor." The exodus grew. 20 students, 40, 60. Professor Velkthor's bioluminescence flared red, anger mixed with panic. The Treaty of Educational Segregation worked only through social pressure, through the quiet enforcement of natural order. But what was happening now was the opposite of quiet. It was rebellion written in the simple act of choosing where to sit. Arya remained frozen in the front row, watching as species who barely spoke to each other united in this bizarre, beautiful protest. The cubs had started it, but something larger had taken hold, a recognition that echoed across genetic barriers and cultural divides. Tar returned to stand beside Arya's seat. His dark eyes met hers with an intelligence that belied his youth. "Pack friend does not sit in back. Pack friend earned front seat." He paused, his translator crackling slightly. "But pack sits together, always." "Mr. Tar," Velkthor's voice had lost its authoritative edge. "You cannot simply. The academic structure requires best students in front, yes?" Tar interrupted. A bold move for a cub addressing a professor. Human is best student. Test scores prove, so we make new front row. In back, he bared his teeth, not a threat but a grin. Is simple logic, Professor. You teach us that. Laughter rippled through the students now congregating in the back half of the lecture hall. Even some of the species loyal to the Veltharian collective looked uncertain, their previous convictions wavering. Arya stood slowly, gathering the few items the cubs had left, her personal effects, the small earth photograph of her family. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed in front of Velkthor. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the hall. I didn't come to the Consortium Academy to prove humanity's worth, she said. I came to learn, to grow, to be part of something bigger than one planet, one species. She looked at Tar, at Mira, at the 100 students who had abandoned their seats. But you've all taught me something more important than quantum mechanics today. You've taught me that intelligence isn't measured by how old your civilization is. It's measured by your capacity to recognize worth in others. She walked to the back row where Tar had arranged her books with meticulous care. As she sat, the cubs immediately clustered around her, creating a protective circle that other students joined. The front half of the lecture hall stood empty, a monument to failed segregation. Professor Velkthor stared at the transformed classroom. His carefully structured hierarchy had collapsed in minutes, undone by the loyalty of children and the courage of those who refused to watch injustice in silence. Classes dismissed, he said finally, his bioluminescence dimming to near black. But no one moved. They had found their place, and it wasn't in the back of the room. It wasn't in the front either. It was together, unified by a principle the Treaty of Educational Segregation had tried to erase. That respect is earned, not inherited, and that sometimes the smallest among them see the truth most clearly. Tar placed his small hand on Arya's shoulder. Next class, we sit front row again. All together. Professor will see. Arya smiled through her tears. Yeah, cub. He will.